Mr. Harvey, please.
Rachel James, 261 King Street. And I was going to be the 16th, but I didn't have time to write any notes for the 16th. And to this point, the other reason I haven't had much time is that the town's been keeping me very busy dealing with other issues related to planning. And it wasn't until 5 p.m. tonight that I was able to track down the actual report and take a look at it. So I'll start with 4 no's. No poem this time. No time to prepare brief, and no difference of opinion with those who've spoken before me, who have said, for example, no to the noise, no to the lack of a neighborhood study, and no to other negative impacts, and no to a decision until the site plan has been firmed up. I'm representing, by the way, the Niagara-on-the-Lake Conservancy. They don't mind if I do this, but they would like it very much if you could wait a while and we could do a proper look at the final plan and the final comments. But in the meantime, I have to say this is the most historic and environmentally significant estate law in this town. However, with all along, is something that has stuck out of my mind as I was at the last meeting, and I've been following some of the other meetings and what has come from the letters to the editor. And the proponents have stood by their rapidly evolving changes. They've stood by each time and defended them. And it is fortunate that the planning staff went out and found all these other comments, because we're now beginning to see that what the public was saying last time around is correct. There's a lot of things they've been saying that turned out to be correct. And the one that jumped out at me from the planning report were the Conservation Authority comments. Because I remember distinctly a couple of people talking about the entrance and exit, I'm not sure which it was or both, into the down underground parking, and about the floodplain. And people saying, well, we're not sure that actually will happen. This is maybe not floodplain. We're well away, but if we aren't, we'll perhaps move it. But what the Conservation Authority has now said is, you must ensure that the 1 Mile Creek, it must be placed in a conservation zone designation. And the developer tonight made it sound like it was a favor they were doing us. But it was the Conservation Authority said this has to be. Many of the residents spoke of the dangers to existing trees. Again, it took the NPCA to call for an update to the developer's analysis of the most recent preliminary site plan and/or tree saving plan, so it's going to happen. That should have happened quite a while ago. The fire department even found a problem or two. New problems, bridges and fire access. We didn't talk about that. And even Parks Canada, to my surprise, talked about the towers and the views from the commons. In contrast to this, as others have pointed out, the planning report did, in several places, downplay the issues. For example, Randwood has not functioned as residential property for over 30 years. No, it hasn't. However, none of the other uses were even close to the intensity of this use. This is sort of, if I look at it roughly, I'm looking at about 3 times the structural size of the existing buildings, maybe more, and 10 to 20 times or more the use, the actual intensity of use on the site. And the noise for sure, because when I first moved here, well actually all back, 42 years ago, I was at an Ontario Municipal Board hearing, and a gentleman came who was the head of Ontario Paper, and he was arguing to divide the Romance property up into 8 lots. He was turned down by the Ontario Municipal Board. But his argument in favor, the argument was he couldn't keep it up, he couldn't keep the expense of it was too much. And to a lot of people, it seemed to be too much. Well, if your modest means was $8,000 a year for gardening. However, another family took it over, and then they had problems, but then the Romances took it over, and they've been able to maintain it. So that took me back. But then I remember the tea parties. The Historical Society had tea parties there. I had friends come from Calgary and took part in sessions at the Institute. Conflict resolution between business and workers. There were quiet walkers, and the foxes were running hand in hand on the commons and such. So those were very quiet uses. They may not have been, they're not commercial. They were commercial in one way, I guess, with the foxes, but they were basically just quiet uses. And this is not, it's far from quiet. And the sound will carry. I recall last summer complaining to people because the fort decided to have an event that went from 3 in the afternoon. They stopped for the river at 10 o'clock at night, I believe. But you could hear it. And you could hear it when they had the event across the river last weekend in July usually. So in the report, they also note that the federally owned public lands provide for a variety of uses and functions that are not residential. Well, the uses I can think of, Dan Aykroyd had one event, that's a big one. A couple of equestrian, as polo events, and scouts with their tents. That is nothing like what we're talking about, so I really don't understand that comment in the report. I also noticed that over and over, I think I counted 6 times, that we're supposed to leave it to the site plan, and we should trust. But with this plan changing and things not being admitted to, but then finally having to be admitted to, and then we'll change it again, I think you really do maybe have to make a change in this process. It's not usual, I know, but I think we really need to see the site plan, because we need to have it shown to us that all of these complaints can be evaluated. And this is a very different application than the others. People talk about the pillar and post and all of those, Queensland and such. It's not only historic, but it's been a quiet use. It's not an industrial site like CC that needs to be cleaned up. It's a naturally and nationally significant site. So I respectfully ask that more time be taken to explore other options. The one I would love most would be a federal government land trust and cultural center. I realize that seems like a dream, just like the romances seem a little like a dream to me. And I appreciate the Christopher Court. They're wanting to come to some kind of conclusion, but it is the larger community that's going to be affected, not as much, we're not as close, but sometimes at night it does seem quite close, and it is part of our culture, it's part of our town, it's part of our history, it's part of our future, and I think it needs to be protected.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call forward our 23rd speaker, and if we have a 24th or 25th, we have some chairs in the on-deck circle there, and the circuits might want to adjust that. And so if I could have your name and address for the record, please.
It's David Bell, 511 Charlotte Street. Thank you for holding this meeting. Pro or con, I think there's a lot of good things said. I'm kind of left now. I almost wasn't going to talk because I said, well, everything's been said. And I sort of came away, I do have a couple of pet issues or pet thoughts, I guess. But one is, I hear good news. And that I've seen the developer willing to recognize some of the deficiencies in the earlier plans and move. And I've heard the court, the local residents of Jim Ryan offer a possibility of a proposal that the residents might find acceptable. I've heard bad news, that everybody's willing to make a change. It's the same thing. And my concern really is what I call definitive scope. What exactly is being approved? What exactly is being agreed upon? There's another related comment to that, and that's called scope creep. It's not personal. And that's today or tomorrow you could approve something. And what is the process? And what's the risk of somebody coming back 1, 2 years down the road and saying, can't quite get there, want to renegotiate? And I think you have to think about those things. And A couple ideas have been brought forward, and I think it's worth thinking about. Do you request more information before you make the decision? That's not a bad thing. Or do you put in strict controls on the fact that this is the deal, make sure it's defined tightly and operate within these bounds? The other point that I'd suggest is the concept of conditional approval. And it's not new in the business world where someone will apply for a permit of one type with a defined scope. And if they execute that within a defined scope, within a defined timeline, they're good to go. If they don't execute within a defined time, the approval is in fact rescinded. And that basically the zoning will go back to where it is. And my concern on this is that it's very easy for us to see 5 years from now that like so many other projects, this project has not gone ahead. And there could be all different people involved. Not the same people in this room, either behind this mic, sitting at the table, or even the developers. They could all be different. And somebody's going to come and say, I have a land with this commercial development, and I'd like to change it to something else. So I think in making the decision, whatever it is, I think make sure you are getting what you think you're getting. And I think it's fair for you to insist on controls to make sure that it gets done as a being committed. If somebody's not prepared to make that level of commitment, then I think they should perhaps spend a little more time thinking about it. That's